Hey, how you doing? This is Tom. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at some of the built-in functions that come with Python. So let's go to our command prompt and start it up. And the first function that we already looked at is the print function. So I can do that, print. We also once again looked at the exit function, which exits pretty much just takes us out of the prompt. Then back into Python, we also saw type, which I'm going to use in just a second. So let's create a variable, a equals 5.6. Then we'll use the type function, and we find out that this is a type float. Now, there are functions for every type of variable, meaning float, string, int, and Boolean all have their own functions. Why would you want that? Well, let's say you have a floating point, like I have this variable a, but I actually want it to be an integer. I don't want a floating point. If I use int and I put a inside of it, I get an integer back out. And you can actually use int. If I put in any number in here, I will get an integer value back out. So if I type 4.9999, I'll get 4. If I type 0.00001, I get 0. Now, this works almost every time. It's going to round things down. But if you kind of push the limits and you stick a whole bunch of 9s in there, say like that, oddly, you'll get out 5. That's because an integer variable can only hold so much information. Once you've put in a number that exceeds the limit for the length that an integer variable can hold, it's just going to round you up to 5. Okay, so that's just int. So if you've thought, well, just based on what I said, you can also have float and Boolean string. So let's see what those can do. So let's say I say float 6, meaning I'm taking this integer variable here and I'm going to turn it into a float. If I do that, I get a 6.0. And so any integer number I put in here, you're going to get a decimal back out. All it does is just add a 0 on. Okay? String works the same way. Say I want to turn an integer into a string, I can do that, and you can tell it's a string because it has the quotes around it. You can also put in a floating point number and get a string back out as well. Now the weird one is Boolean. So Boolean, if you remember, is denoted by bool. So if I put a 1 in here, I get true. If I put 100 in here, I get true. If I put a negative, whatever that is in there, I get true. And the thing is every number that you actually put into bool, except for 0, is going to give you true. And the way it works in most programming languages and in Python is every non-zero value is true and only 0 is false. So 0 is the only thing that's false. And you can actually double check this by using int and by putting true inside of it. So remember, true is capitalized. If I do int true, I get a 1. If I do int false, I get 0. So true is usually represented as 1, but it can also be any other non-zero number. So the actual value in Python for true is 1. But when you're putting anything in there for bool, any non-zero number will also be represented as true. You can do this also with float. If you do float true or float false, you're going to get zeros. All right. So that's just a few interesting functions using the types that we've already talked about. There's also many other functions out there. So for example, there is some functions that will let you do things like find out what the binary of a number is. So if I do bin 100, it gives me the binary value of 100, which is this right here. And this B is saying, 0B is saying, hey, I'm doing binary. You might know what binary is. I'm sure you've seen binary before. It's just those ones and zeros that people always talk about with computers. There's also things like hex, and there's also things like oct. And these are just different number systems. And we're not going to talk about these now, but later on when I do some more of the fundamentals of computers, we're going to look at different number systems, and we'll have a bunch of videos that walk through different ways that you can change a regular decimal number, which means a base 10 number, into binary hex or our oct. So any of those we'll work on later. Right now, you probably won't need them pretty much ever. Okay, so the interesting thing is all of these just have one value that we're putting into them, one input. Another word for this is parameter. They all have one parameter. So we want to look at another function. This one's called pow, and I'm going to do 5, 2. So this actually has two parameters, or two inputs. It has a 5 and a 2. And if I hit enter, I get 25. Okay, so I'm going to do a few more of these, and you see if you can figure out what does this actually do. Okay, so by now, hopefully, I hope at least, you figured out that this is power of. So this is 5 to the power of 2, 10 to the power of 2, 2 to the power of 3, 4 to the power of 3. It gives you these numbers here. So this is can also be written like this in Python. I can do 5, 2, or I can do 10, 2, but we haven't got to these yet. We're going to get to those actually in the next section when I start talking about operators. But for right now, this function is one way that you can do this. Another function that's kind of interesting is this one. So let's say I have 10, 3. And let's say I do 15, 5, or 6, 4. Okay, so what's this function doing? Well, this function is dividing and giving you the answer and the remainder. So 10 divided by 3. 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1 left over. 15 and 5. 5 goes into 15 3 times, nothing left over. 4 goes into 6 1 time, and 2 left over. So if you have a really large number and you divide it by 5, it'll tell you how much you have, how much it goes in and what's left over. Okay, so this is a kind of interesting function. You're probably not going to use this a whole lot, but it's just something that is kind of interesting that you could use at some point. Okay, so these are just a few functions that are built in. We're going to look at a lot more functions. There are tens of thousands of functions created by other people and that are part of Python together, and we're going to use a lot of functions coming up. But for right now, just take a look, just get the idea of what a function is and be comfortable with that. Okay, so a function takes some input, or as I said, parameters, and gives you an answer of some sort. And so when we get to the lessons on creating our own functions, you'll be able to make your own stuff, and you'll see just how powerful those are. In the next lesson, I'm going to do a little bit more with this, and I'm going to show you how you can put a function inside of another function. I'm going to talk about how that works and what that means. All right, see you then.